Well, welcome to the Creo Collective webinar on Apest in your local context. I got Brandon Kelly with me from 5Q. He and I actually became friends rooming together in this really super cool, expensive hotel that they put us up in. How about it, buddy?
If you call an Airbnb in an apartment in New Jersey an expensive hotel, so be it. I mean, it was expensive, but when the hot water ran out, we knew we were in trouble.
It was great. Taking cold showers, and the AC went out. The hot water went out, and the AC went out.
Yeah,
it was next level. The windows open, you could hear people yelling and making noise in the middle of the night. It was great. So Brandon, your primary focus with Movement Leaders Collective is 5Q, and some of you guys that are tuning in, watching this or watching it later, have probably read 5Q, or you've read The Permanent Revolution. I know most of you, if you're Creo, are familiar with Apest. So Brandon, I'd love to hear, maybe you could just give a description on Apest, but I'd love for you to give me a description if you're sharing Apest to someone street level. How would you describe Apest to average Joe on the street?
Yeah, sure. Well, you should have prepped me for that one. That's a good one. So, Apest is really this picture of design that God has instilled in every individual, as well as every business and organization, community. And it's unique because it exists both on an individual level and on a community level at the same time. And in that, we get to look at how has God created me? Like, so what's my unique part to play in our business or in our church or organization or in our group? How am I uniquely designed for that? But then as we think about the way that our group or business lives out its calling or mission or purpose, are we hitting all the marks of what it means to be whole and full and doing what needs to be done? And so in that, it's really looking at, like the body. Are we missing an arm? Are we missing a foot? Are we missing eyes or something like that? So it gives a lens really to, again, look at yourself, but also to look at the communities you're a part of and how are they functioning, and are they functioning to their fullest potential?
Yeah. So if you could break down, you're talking to somebody in your neighborhood, they're saying, hey, I know you do this work with this thing called 5Q, whatever. I heard you were the 5Q guru.
Yeah.
We're living in the same neighborhood. What is that? Like, what does all that mean? How would you describe apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic? How would you break those down?
Yeah, the way I might describe it to my neighbors, so I'm going to put in mind my neighbor in particular, but I think the way that we describe, just contextually Apest is so significantly important. Words apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher are going to work in some places and in some times, but even within certain like church settings, apostle is like a bad word, or prophet's a bad word, and so you really have to know the context that you're living in to know what language we got to use. So I'm just imagining
So if somebody's sort of antagonistic toward, I don't believe in modern day apostles, prophets, you wouldn't debate them for hours upon hours?
Not in the moment. We might get there eventually. I like to use what I call a this is that mentality. And so like I'll try to, touch base with, who's in my local church generally, and where are they at. And if I find apostle and prophet to be challenging words, or any of them, frankly, then I'm going to come up with language that works. And we're going to live into that and use that. And eventually, after years of using it, I'm going to say, hey, you know how we always talk about like, everyday missionaries? Well, that's what the Bible calls apostles. And so this is that. This thing that you're now comfortable with and we talk about all the time is really this language over here. And so you begin to try to redefine it over time by being intentional with your language that you're using initially, and then pointing where you may need it to go on the back end. But I imagine, our next door neighbors are these really crazy apostolic dynamic individuals, wife, husband, one daughter, and they are, I kid you not, they are like internationally known twirlers, like with batons. And they coach, they make an entire, between the two of them, they make an entire third income in their household by coaching for twirling. And they're heading to Europe in like a week to go.
Do they ever do they ever put on neighborhood shows for you guys?
So they have like 20 like college age young ladies. There's one or two guys that come and like stay in their house, and they're out in the street all day long, like throwing the baton up in the air, all the like. This is my life. It's
Brandon,
amazing.
have you picked up any twirling skills from this?
So a little bit. My daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, wanted to learn. So now we have a couple batons in our house, and I had to learn to do it so that I could practice. It does this.
It's more caught than taught. It's like discipleship.
A little bit. But if I were talking to them, I would start with who they are and what I know about them. And so, I think about PJ, that's the wife. She's I think she's an evangelist extraordinaire. And so, I would talk to her about the way that she connects with people and the way that she really reaches out and she's able to draw people in, and she builds relationships so quickly. Her husband's not quite the same way. He's very, determined. I think he's more of the business starter, and he just goes for things. They're like, for a time, we're designing big balloon bouquet things. It's called the Balloon Bar. So they had a small business doing that for a while. So, I would talk to him about the way that he's more entrepreneurial and creative, and they just go for things and make things happen, and start to kind of pull out those qualities of what I see in them. And in that way, also start to press through what you probably have seen within like the kids that you're coaching, and the way that you kind of manage your business. You probably know that there's got to be like kind of research development and the way that we start new things. You got to kind of have new endeavors. So there's some people that fit that mold, and then there's others that are more on the sales side. They build the relationships, and you kind of have that salesperson type of mentality. But then you guys coach too. And so you're kind of training, you're investing what you know into other people and helping them develop. And so that's kind of like a third way to operate. But then you guys build community too, because these kids come and stay with you, and they eat with you, and they watch your daughter and make all of that sort of stuff happen. So, you kind of see kind of some of that community care type of piece happening. And you guys know what's right to do and what's wrong to do. I mean, you're invested into competition. There's a right thing to do and a wrong thing to do. And so you have kind of that sense of justice that works within you as well. And so you probably see that within the kids that you coach. One of them kind of leans this direction. John, I think you kind of lean more towards that entrepreneurial side. PJ, I think you kind of lean more towards that sales and relational sort of side. But, we're all kind of gifted in those different ways. And I think when we start to see all of those at work, you see that bigger picture start to unfold of how each of us are specifically and uniquely gifted. but then how when we all come together, you kind of see that big picture of what we all need as we come into community together. So I would probably start just by naming stuff, and terminology might work based upon who they are. But even just naming out the attributes, I think, can be really helpful without putting labels. I think once you get like millennials and definitely into like Gen Z, nobody likes labels anymore. And so maybe instead of stepping into labels, it's just calling out characteristic and attributes and what you see in people.
Yeah, no, that's good. So would you see Apest as more, get, well, first off, would you call Apest gifts or calling, or, how would you describe, because people talk about gifts and spiritual
Yeah,
gifts. You see Apest is different than that, as calling. How do you
yeah, I
break
think
that down?
I tend to use the word calling most of all. That's a little bit harder depending on who you're talking to. So like if I'm talking to my neighbors, I'm not sure calling would be as palatable as maybe some idea of talent or gift would be. It's a really calling's a really strong word. But when you go to Ephesians 4 in scripture, I mean the word is calling. Be sure of the calling to which you have been called, right? Is what is laid out at the very beginning of Ephesians 4. So I do think it's calling. And there should be that sense of not just talent or ability or gift, but my life seems off if I'm not doing this thing. And that's so like my main gig is I lead a local church. That's my main gig. And there's a lot of components of like local church ministry that doesn't resonate for me. I mean, you do it, right? And we all have a responsibility to do it all because we all need to imitate Jesus. But there are things that you're just more naturally tuned into and that resonate better and that brings life to you when you do it. And, I care about people, most of the time. And so, if I need to sit down and chat with someone or someone's hurting or someone's crying, I always feel awkward doing it. But, that's what Jesus did. And so, I have to do it too. But boy, I just had a conversation an hour ago talking about how we could sponsor and give away tickets to like this Winnie the Pooh show at our local performing arts center, and how the church could partner with the performing arts center to make like the arts more happen within the community. And that conversation's way more life-giving to me, kind of more apostolically than necessarily going and sitting with someone who's crying. But we all have to follow Jesus and imitate Jesus. So we have to do it all at kind of that baseline competency level. But I think calling speaks to that idea that it resonates and it brings life and it gives you energy when you do it versus, well, it's the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it anyways type of a deal.
Yeah. So would you see Apest more as something used for the church, or more how somebody uniquely represents or reflects the image of Jesus all the time?
I think it's all the time. Absolutely. So, we had a block party on our street on July 4th. It was great to see. So I started branching out the idea and talking to some neighbors about like, hey, what do you guys think about having a block party? We could grill, we could do this. And there's one gal that lives across the street who it really is an evangelist. And she's like, I'll print up the flyers and hand them out to everybody. And she knows everybody on the street, right? Like she's friends with everybody. And I mean, I think those things show up in all of life. There's a special, I think, unique place where it fits within the life of the church and what God's doing in bringing the kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. But I think that echoes throughout all of our lives, and even into the realm of the secular. Those that don't yet follow Jesus still have these things like built into them because the handprint of God is on the way that they're designed and created anyways. And so you can see, the apostolic, prophetic, evangelist, shepherd, teacher kind of in everybody. You can call it out of everybody, even if they don't know who Jesus is yet, and see that that's starting to stir with them. It's just, what purpose are you using it for in the end run, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. So let me ask you this. A lot of people, when we talk about Apest, are trying to figure out how do you how do you take a concept like Apest from being an idea that people sort of understand within your faith community or missional movement to a culture that's created where everyone is kind of living into their identity, their calling, their passions? How do you shift it from we understand what Apest is to we have an Apest culture here?
Yeah. Yeah. So the word that I like to use is integration. And I think with a lot of whatever it is organizationally, we have a tendency, we find something really cool and different and new. What we do is we just kind of slap it on the outside of whatever the organization is. And so it's this add-on, it's this addendum to the typical happenings of our missional community or missional movement. And integration is more than just learning. Integration means we're looking at everything through the lens of Apest. And there's lots of other things that we can do that with, right? Discipleship and mission and all the like. We want to integrate it and see it a part of everything that's happening and everything that we do. And so that requires that we look at what we're doing through different, the different aspects. Like, so how do we develop leaders? And where does Apest exist in the development of leaders? So for us, within like the local church, we both talk about Apest when people are first integrating into the life of the church. And so they're maybe new and trying to figure out who we are and what we're doing. And so we talk about how God has created you and look at Apest through that. But also when we pull people into roles and responsibilities, leadership roles, we do both Apest as a way to know who's on team, but also as a way of investing in development. So we ensure that everybody has kind of a baseline understanding of all five, as well as how to excel in their own gifting. So leadership development's one, communication is another. And so, when you think about the way that you maybe put out flyers, or if you have a website or an app, like when you look through that, do you see the apostolic in that? Do you see the prophetic in that? I mean, are you talking about what you're doing missionally? Are you talking about the way you're building community? Are you talking about what you're learning? Is all of that represented in that, or is it only one piece of the puzzle? The stories you tell, right? So stories are extremely important. Have you learned to tell stories about all five, or only stories about like one? So I imagine kind of in the Creo world, that probably the majority of people would maybe lean more apostolically. And so the stories that, if you're creating new businesses, if you're side hustles, all the like, that you're going to tell a lot of stories that are more missionally driven. But if you want to see the holistic picture, you're going to also have to tell some stories about what's happening prophetically, evangelistically, shepherding, and teaching as well. And in that way, you build that holistic culture. Otherwise, if you're not intentional about how you're integrating it, you're going to end up one-sided out of the five, right? And that's usually our complaint looking at the local, like the typical standard churches, right? They've gone all shepherd and teaching. How dare they? Well, we can have a tendency to swing the other way as well and go, all apostolic evangelistic and miss out on all of it. So we have to be intentional about the stories we tell, the way we set up our environments, the way we develop leaders. All of that should have all five present in it at all times.
That's a really good word, Brandon, of whoever is sort of organizing people, pulling people together, the person that's a voice tends to tell stories out of their calling.
Yeah.
So if you have a couple apostolic people that are a part of a network, all you're going to hear is stories about movement. and so, yeah, having Apest represented to show a fuller picture of what's happening across the movement, I think that's a really great observation.
Yeah. Well, and I had somebody ask me, it was really good, right? So I have to speak every Sunday. It's part of our process. And someone said, every Sunday you finish by telling us who we need to go out and reach, and how we need to connect this with people that don't know Jesus. And like, I agree with you, and that's great. But sometimes you just need to tell us to like sit still and heal and like be different. And that would be good too. And it was a really striking moment for me because, yeah, everything ended with like, well, here's what Jesus said. Now, like, get out there and start like meeting your neighbors and building relationships, and never just just be healed today. Like, just leave a little bit more put together than you walked in as.
It's funny you say that, Brandon, because we had in our micro church, we had people read the same story, and then we said, what did you see? And
Yeah.
our observation was evangelists always saw reaching people.
Yeah.
Shepherds always saw caring for people. Apostles always saw like this could be a movement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so across the board, you even realize that people read scripture through the lens of their calling. And it's not that we're like twisting it. I think it's because it's all there.
Yeah.
And the more that you can call out every person's observations as they're reading a text, it adds layers of depth to the text. And you go, yeah, it is a prophetic text. It is an apostolic text.
Yeah.
It is a text about caring and loving. And, so there's that, but it's also sort of layers, I think, to sometimes we silo the callings, right? Like you got parties and trying to reach people is just an evangelistic thing, but you probably need shepherds at a party, right?
Yeah. Yep. I'm not as much of an evangelist, and so it was really like I put it together, I made it happen, right? Initiated it. Good grief, I needed more people there to like actually have the conversations and get things rolling, because it's just harder for me to do that sort of stuff. But I think that's where what you're saying about everyone seeing it differently. I think one of the greatest tools to integrating Apest into whatever you're doing is merely problem solving with an Apest lens. And I like to do that in two ways. And in both instances, like, get a dry erase board and throw your problem in the middle of the board, put a big circle around it, right? And then put APEST around it. And the place I always like to start is like, whoever's not got that calling, act like they have that calling, and go all the way around without the people who have those callings saying whatever it is about those. And what happens is you have to start putting on your hat and living in other people's shoes and trying to look at the world differently than the way you look at it. So, if I'm more shepherding in nature, to look at the world prophetically is a challenge, but I can do that intentionally when I'm trying to solve a problem. And then you have the people with the callings that line up, like follow after and say, well, I am apostolic, and this is how I would see this. And in that way, everybody gets to kind of learn and experience both, like trying to do it and then seeing what they missed, trying to look through those eyes. But at the end of it, you end up with all of these solutions to a problem that you would like never have thought of before, because you took it through all five. And you just get a whole wide dynamic. And you're not going to use all five of them, whatever the problem is, but you would get just a much broader picture, and sometimes merging a couple things together. So like, we have international students, we're right next door to university, international students that have been engaging. We're trying to figure out like, so what do we like, we have like 15, we've never like had international students like that. So like, what do we do with them? So you say like, okay, what do we do with the international student? Big circle around and say, well, what would an apostle do? And what would a prophet do? And what would an evangelist do? What would a shepherd do? And what would a teacher do? And try to walk through all those and come up with different solutions. And, some of that was like, well, let's build community for them. Well, let's help the domestic people learn what it is to be an international student and what it is to be in a different country, right? So we just kind of like come up with all these ideas and come up with a pathway forward out of that.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think you could probably do that at every level, even a party that you're throwing.
Yeah.
You go, Okay, we're planning this barbecue. You get the prophets to weigh in. They're going, who are we not inviting?
Yeah.
Who are we leaving out? Who would Jesus include that we're not including? And so you sort of get every voice processing around how we do this in a more Christ-like way. So I guess in the planning process, you're asking apostolic questions.
Yeah.
You're asking prophetic questions. You're asking evangelistic questions, right? You sort of go all the way through.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the stereotypical approach that I think so many, at least churches take, is it's like, well, it's back to the spiritual gift inventories, right? It's like, what's your gift, and then where can we put you that lines up with that gift? So you come out as a teacher, so we'll put you in kids ministry, or you come out as a prophet, so maybe we'll put you on the worship team. But what they miss is you need all five on the worship team. You need all five in kids ministry. I mean, to separate people out like that is actually not the way to go. You need the whole body. You need all of the callings like working together. And so, block party, yeah, you need all the callings there to have the best holistic sort of approach to ministry and to life that you can possibly get.
Yeah, no, that's good. So let me ask you this: you're working with a lot of different movements, networks with 5Q. What are some of the things that you're seeing, and how Apest is influencing movements all over the country, all over the globe?
Yeah, I think it at the bare bone level, it really is that kind of holistic approach aspect. Because there's such a natural tendency for, as goes the leader, so goes the organization type of a thing, that to have a lens that gives a broader picture than what we would typically come with on our own is really expanding the dynamics of movements and what they're actually able to accomplish. To be intentional about who's on your team with maybe a little bit wider variety of gifts, to set up the dynamics of, what happens when the apostle, has started, scaled, and gotten the movement organization to this point, and I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Have I invested in the next group of people that have built community and are ready to take it to the next level, so that I can go on and just start the next thing or the different thing. Seeing those things at play, I think, is really huge. But I think there ends up being a spectrum of the way that we usually come about it. It's why integration is such, I think, a key word. But the two ways that we've seen come about it is either like the superficial, like everybody read the book, everybody took the test, we're good. And it really doesn't change anything. It's just now a terminology that you sometimes use. Or the other side is we're going to blow up everything. And now we're going to just, whatever staff employees we have, we're going to make sure we hire equally all five. We're going to reorganize the whole thing so that everything is really siloed. And it's kind of this like Uber, like you jumped in the deep end and went too far, and now you're drowning with something that's unsustainable and really unhelpful in the long run. And so having that more mitigated approach of take what you already have and start to leverage 5Q for its benefits, for its problem solving, for its picture of team, for the way it calls out the best of what each person has to bring, as well as bringing a holistic approach, to leverage those things to take your business or your organization, your movement to the next level, I think is a much better approach. And so I usually really caution against, don't go superficial, because that you're going to spend a whole lot of time and not really get anywhere. But like, don't kill yourself either. You don't have to blow it up to get it to work. You can just take it to the next step by doing the integration piece.
Okay, so let's say you have a collection of micro churches, missional communities, small groups that are trying to be on mission, whatever. Let's say you have a collection of those and you observe, which pretty much everyone ends up having the same observation. The Apest is not like 20% of my people are apostolic, 20% are prophetic, 20% are it's very disproportionate,
Yeah.
right? So how do you advise people through, across our whole movement of 10, 20, however many micro churches, we've got 3 apostolic types, but then we've got 49 shepherds.
Yeah.
So speak to that.
Yeah. So you can operate differently than what the makeup of your people is. And so to give consideration to the functions that you're doing as much as the people who are in the room. And if you're aware of who's in the room, so if you know that you have 3 apostles and 40 shepherds, you just call it out and you say, listen, here's the perspective, APEST. We know we have 3 A's, we have 40 S's, and we ain't got nothing, if anything else. That's okay. We're going to pray that the Lord would bring into our community some more P, E's, and T's, just to help give us some perspective on dynamics. Until then, we're all going to pretend that we're all P's. We're all going to pretend we're all E's. We're going to put intentionality into thinking in that direction. I think it's unintentionality that usually gets you into trouble. So if we have awareness of what a prophet would do and how they would operate and what the behaviors of our micro churches would be if we were operating more prophetically, allows us to say, what could we do? What should we do to take a step into the prophetic, to take a step into the evangelist, and take a step into the shepherd? Even though that's not our gifting, we can think that way, we can behave that way, and then continue to pray that more people would come into our community that would represent the other ones, that might help us to give more maturity and more direct intelligence in that sort of direction. So I pray, be thankful for what you have, pray for what you need, and act like you've already got it would be the methodology I would go down.
Yeah, and it's a good practice too, because even if you're, so for me, apostolic is very high, shepherd is very low. But if my kid had a bad day and got bullied, he doesn't need apostolic dad. He needs shepherd dad. So if we don't sort of practice thinking through these different lenses and approaching situations based on what the need is, right? We need to step into this prophetically, or man, we need to step into this with this neighborhood evangelistically. You can't just sit there with your neighbors and go, I'm just going to be someone who is critiquing what is broken about our neighborhood without extending a table, right? You've got to put on those different hats. It's part of growth, and it's part of healthiness, right? For each of us.
Well, and as you begin to mature in the other 4, what you find is it makes you a better whatever your primary is. So as I mature in the shepherding's my lowest. As I mature in the shepherding a bit, I got lots of room to grow. But as I mature in that, it actually makes me a better apostle. As I mature in the prophetic, it makes me a better apostle. And so I try to tell people, you got to have the core competencies there of all 5. And it's up to your, micro churches, your organization, decide what is the core competency for all 5. I keep it simple and accessible, but hit the core competency in all 5 and then start to just grow. Stand at the shoulder of somebody who's a really excellent shepherd. One of my first hires here in the local church was I hired an uber shepherd. Number 1 is S, number 2 is A. And for me, that enables her to speak my language because my first one's A. But I submit to whatever she tells me to do on the shepherding side. So she actually has access to my calendar. And what she does is she puts on my calendar, like, go visit this person, call this person, write this person a note. And then she tells me like the things that I would never think of. Like, so, you go to visit someone in the hospital and she writes a note to me and says, Like, hey, this person used to be a teacher. They love to talk about kids and teaching and all the like, talk about that. And she just has such great emotional intelligence in that arena. And I just do whatever she tells me to do. She knows how much time I have. She knows what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. But allowing her to take the lead on that makes me better as the shepherding. I'll never be a great one. I'll always be primary apostle, but it allows me to mature better. And in that end, allows me to relate to people a lot better as an apostle and to connect and actually build community as I'm going.
No, that's helpful. And we, we probably need to be aware of our tendency to shape whatever environment that we're in based on our calling. So you probably have to go out of your way to really draw out the other, the other functions of Apest. Say, let me put it this way. Even if I try to shut up about apostolic things, it just comes out. Yeah. So if I try really hard to be disproportionately about, shepherding and teaching and all of that, the apostolic and evangelistic is just going to burst out anyway. And maybe there will be some sort of balance if I try to see all of that. So let's put it another way. If you're a shepherd or a teacher, maybe you need to really try hard toward apostolic and prophetic thinking with your group, because the shepherding and teaching is going to come out if that's more who you are. You agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we don't even, self-awareness, we don't even realize how much it comes out. So I was on a call earlier today with a friend who's getting ready to release a book, and she was asking, what else could I do to release the book? And I just started rattling off, well, you could do this, and you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. And someone else was on the call who's, different calling. And they're like, well, those are all amazing ideas. And to me, it was like, well, they just make sense. I mean, that's just what I heard other people do. It sounds right, sounds good. And like, it's just so natural. It's so easy. It just oozes from you, seeps, disgusting words, but oozes and seeps from you, right? And what even seems like you're holding back, like, I'm going to be more shepherding, I'm going to hold back the apostolic. You're still oozing all the apostolic. You're oozing your calling out of you all the time. And so you just kind of have to be really self-aware about your language and your posture and the things you talk about and your priorities, because they'll be shaped by that. And you don't have to don't not be who you are. You are who God has called you to be, but have enough self-awareness to know how to mitigate, depending on the context, environment, and situation that you're in. So you can come with intelligence and what's needed in the moment.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Brandon, thanks for your input today and just sharing a little bit around Apest. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the work you're doing, and glad we get to partner, bro.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to me.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.